Hi, it's Steph here from the bead shop in Nottingham. I'm going to show you how to make a pair of earrings to match this pendant I've just made. So it's using copper wire and Preciosa bicone beads that are wired on, but it just makes a really simple, elegant shape. And because there's not a lot to it, they should be nice and light to wear as earrings, but still have a nice impact. So because I'm going to make earrings, I'm going to try and make the frame for the actual leaf shape as similar as I can, so I've got a matching pair. I'm not so precious that I want my both my leaves to be absolutely spot on perfect. I think when you're making something by hand, it not being 100% perfect is absolutely fine, and actually just gives it a little bit more character. That said, I do want my earrings to look like they are two of the same pair. So first of all, I'm just going to cut myself some 1mm copper wire. So I'm using approximately 20 centimetres of wire for both, just so I've got enough to hold on to and work with. So I'll cut two approximately the same. That's what I'm going to work with. So I am going to, because copper wire is so soft and malleable, I am going to straighten it and harden it a little bit first. So I'm just going to grip one side of my wire with my Chainnose pliers, and then I'm using nylon Chainnose just to run it along the length a couple of times. You have to hold quite firmly to do this, and this will not only straighten up the wire, it will also harden it slightly too. I'm going to do the same to the other one. It doesn't take much, and you can do that in your hands if you need to and you don't have nylon jaw pliers. So they're a little bit straighter, and they are a bit firmer too now. So what I'm going to do is form this shape, but I'm going to try and do the actual frame section at the same time so that I get roughly the same shape for both my earrings. So I'm using Chainnose pliers, approximately 1/3 to near the centre, so I'm not going to worry about too much about the ends here where I gripped because they're a bit dented now, but I'm going to probably from there grip maybe about just over 1/3, maybe 2/5 along the wires, and then I'm going to make a nice firm right angle there. So I'm just pushing that against the side of the pliers. You do have to grip everything quite firmly to get a nice sharp bend, and that's going to form the point of the leaf. Now you can form this a little bit by hand, but the next bit I'm going to do is actually form the main wide section of the leaf around something round. Now you'll probably have something to hand. I have got a tube of vitamin C beads, which is the perfect size for this. So without pushing too far down, I want to keep that triangular shape at the side there, and then just hold firmly so that that's fairly central to the circle on the top, but then curve the wires around. So I've just pushed that round to get a nice rounded shape. And when I take the tube out, I should have two sort of almost like teardrop shapes, which will form the main part of my leaf. So now I'm going to keep hold of the two pieces together again to try and ensure that they end up roughly the same size. And the next thing I'm going to do is form this loop on top. So to do that, I am using round nose pliers, and I'm just going to grip the top of the leaf and pull the ends, short ends around. Now, because I've got the basic shape started here, I can then work on one each to make it easier. Now I have 2 loops. That one's ever so slightly bigger, so I'm just going to pull that round a little bit more. There we go, they're about the same now. Now we can trim off this excess little bit of wire from inside the loop. So I'm just lining up the blade of my flush cutters just inside the loop so it doesn't overlap. You can see there. And then the same on the other one. So it's just the flat side where the blade is always where the cut is being made. So easy sometimes to pick them up the wrong way around. So there, the loops on both. Finished there. And now this long section is going to form the middle vein of the leaf. So in order to do that, I'm just going to position my pliers so that they are just below the loop. So ideally I want the bend I'm making to sort of meet the loop here. So I'm just going to hold that firmly and then push down against the pliers again. And those 2 bends then join up at the top here. Now you can always straighten that up and make it a bit sharper if needs be. And then this is going to meet down at the middle there. I'm going to do the same on this one first. So gripping just before where you want the bend and then being quite firm about pushing it against the side of the pliers and you get a nice sharp bend. So they are looking pretty similar now. We can always tweak them, bend them a little bit with your fingers if you want to. I think the vein in the middle looks quite nice. If there's a slight curve to it, it looks a little bit more organic, so you can manipulate that however you like. So you only need subtle movements. And always just do a little bit of shaping at a time. You can always bend it back. If you go too far, sometimes it can be hard to bring it back. So they have a little subtle bend in them now. And now I'm going to snip off this excess bit of wire so that it meets just inside the tip of the leaf. So again, I'm using the flush cutters with the flat side just inside there. Oops. Let's get the right angle. There we go. You can always trim off a little bit more. So that looks pretty good. There we go. So there, the basic frame. We can now flatten it a little bit. So I'm just using my Chainnose pliers just to bring the loop nice and level, and then just give that a little bit of tweak with my fingers to get it fairly flat and level there. And the same with this one. There we go. Now I'll probably actually, when I finish these, make the pair in this way so that they mirror one another. So that's not as important just yet, but when I do the next bit, it will be. So the next thing to do is I'm going to hammer these to give them a little bit of texture, but also to flatten the wire. So I'm using a steel bench block, just moving my bead mat out of the way. And this is just a bit of hardboard, chipboard to protect the table. And then I also have a chasing hammer. So these have got a flat side and then a ball side, and I'm going to be using both. So I'm going to work a little bit on each so that I'm hopefully mirroring the same thing on each leaf. So to begin with, I'm just going to use the flat side to give it a little gentle hammering all over. This will harden the wire, and it will also flatten it slightly. So I'm going to do that to both of them first, but I will speed through this bit, and also you can't really hear me over the hammering, so I will mute myself. Right. You'll notice that after hammering they will feel a lot firmer, and that's because you're really hardening all those particles in there and making it a lot firmer. So all I've done really now is flattened it on both sides. The texture's a little bit funny because it's quite hard to get it completely smooth. However, for this project, I'm actually going to purposefully add some texture. So now that I've hammered with the flat side of the chasing hammer, I'm going to actually add some dimples all the way along. So I'm going to use the ball side and just do this exactly the same, but just down the edges. I'm leaving the loop and the central bit. Mainly the central bit because it's going to get beaded anyway, so you're not really going to notice so much of the texture there. Right, so you'll see there's a nice little bit of texture which then helps catch the light on the edges there. Sometimes as you hammer, the shapes sort of move around a bit because you're spreading the actual metal. So you can just give things a little gentle tweak. This loops come a little bit wider, so I'm actually going to put my round nose pliers back in there and just give that a little tweak, just to bring it back together. And then I'd still say that they're pretty much a pair. So now I can wire on some beads. You can always with wire just tweak it until you're happy with it. It's quite forgiving, which is always nice. But the wiring on the beads will also help stabilize the shape. There we go. Right, back to the bead mat. Move that out of the way. So here I used some different sized beads along here, and I've decided that I'm going to make it a little bit more uniform on the earrings. So I'm just going to make sure my beads are going to fit along as well. So I've got 6mm, some 5mm, 4mm, and I've even got a few 3mm as well, so it can be nice and graduated. And I'm hoping that I can get 2 of each size inside there, which I think I will be able to do. The nice thing about bicones is that because they've got flat sides, you can actually make them line up really nice and neatly against the wire. So one flat side is sat against that central sort of vein in the leaf, and that really helps make them look uniform and helps keep them in place as you wire them on. So it's looking like these are going to fit really nicely. And I've got a few spare 3mm, so if I get to the end and there's enough space, I can always pop another little small one in there. So that's one set here and another set there, ready with spares if they're needed. Right, so to actually wire on the beads, I'm using copper wire again, but this time I am using 0.4mm, which is really fine but easy to manipulate to hold everything in place. Just got to find the end. So for this, I'm only using probably about 30 centimetres. I won't need all of that, but as you work with particularly very fine wire, it gets a little bit brittle. So trying to work I'm working with a slightly longer piece, knowing full well that the end section is going to get a little bit more brittle, but it just gives you something to hold on to. So to begin with, I'm going to hold my 0.4 wire against the frame of the leaf with an excess bit sticking out here, and this little short tail is what I'm going to use to secure the length of wire on and also hold the two bits that are moving around at the top together. So I'm just going to hold that together and then wrap around the two sections 3 times. I'm pulling it quite firmly as I go round to try and keep that really nice and neat. And I'm also trying to make sure that the wire is staying nice and straight, so it's not going over the top of itself or leaving too wide a gap between the two areas. And now, for now, I'm just going to leave that as it is, and I will deal with that end at the end. And now this piece of wire is in the right position to continue down the centre here. So first of all, I'm just going to wrap twice around this bit. So rather than trying to feed the wire in from the very end through the leaf, I actually tend to push it through to create a little loop and then pull it through like so, and that just works a little bit easier, and it tends to be less prone to kinking the wire as well. So now I've gone round, I can then pick up my first bead, which is the 6mm. Slide that all the way down. And then this is where I hold the bead against the frame. So that flat side, which I was talking about earlier, is really helpful to keeping that in position. So I'm holding the bead in position with the frame with my left hand, and then I'm actually doing the wiring with my right. So I'm just keeping the bead in place as I bring my wire down and up there, and then go all the way around once to hold that in place before picking up any more beads. So back to the front, and that is now secured. So I'm going to pick up my next bead. Hold that in position with the flat side against the middle, and then round again. And I'm always holding the wire quite firmly and pulling quite firmly without pulling it. I'm not pulling it without bracing against. So I'm using my left hand to brace against the frame and my right hand to pull the wire tight, so I'm not pulling it out of shape. So now we're ready for the next bead, which is now onto 5mm after adding 2 6mm. I'm holding that against the frame, then round, and then back to the front, and adding another 5mm. Sliding the wire along, and again, same way, hold against the frame, now, because this bit is not attached to the frame at the bottom yet, you can sometimes loop that round. Doesn't always mean you get in the right position, so I'm sort of doing a bit of a mixture of feeding it through and looping it over. So now I've got 2 6, 2 5, and now I'm going to add my first of my 4mm. And everything else is the same, so we're feeding the wire down around once, and then back up, and then another 4mm, and then that in position while we feed the wire around. And then we're now onto the very little 3mm. And it's the same, but it's just a little bit fiddlier because the beads are much smaller. So hold that in position, round the wire and then back to the front. And feed the last 3mm on. And I'm just going to hold that in position and wrap round the wire and then back to the front. Now there's not really the space at the end there for another 3mm, so 2 of each has been perfect for that. But to finish off, we do need to get the wire to attach this middle vein, which currently is sort of floating about a bit, and just secure that to the bottom point here. So in order to get my wire into the right position, I'm actually going to wrap a couple more times around this little section so I end up closer to the end. I'm just going slow and steady at this point to make sure everything stays neat. And now that I'm in this position, I can come round to the front. So what I'm going to be doing is wiring on this side of the middle a few times and then on that side of the middle so it looks nice and even and symmetrical at the bottom. So I'm just going to feed that round to the frame. Go around once more. And again, I'm just pulling everything quite firmly as I go so to keep it all looking nice and neat and tight. And then on the last one, I'm not going to bring it back round to the front. I'm just going to pull it tight to the back. And I'm really pulling that last one because what I'm going to do here on the back is cut it off level with the back here using the flush cutters. And then using the Chainnose pliers is just push that against the frame to make it nice and tight in there, and you can't feel the sharpness there, and that will just nicely hide that. And on the front, that's left it really nice and neat. And at the back at the top here, I'm just going to use that last little tail to join, or just to balance out this little top bit here. So there's 3 little spirals of wire here, so I'm just going to do the same on this side just to even it out and make it look a little bit more balanced. Then you finish off the wire in the same way. So I'm going to pull it tight on the back on this last wrap, trim it off on the back, and then push that against the frame there. And that's the first of our earrings complete. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing with this one, except I'm going to be starting the wire on this side and then adding the beads down this section. So that's the wider section of the 2 halves, and that way I will end up with a symmetrical pair of earrings. Everything else is the same there, so I will speed this up, but then you'll see the finished pair at the end. So now we have 2 symmetrical leaf earrings. All we have to do now is actually attach the earring components. So I'm using rose gold fishhooks here because they blend in brilliantly with the copper wire. So I'm just going to simply add those on. And these are going to be a lovely addition to an autumnal wardrobe with the lovely warm tones of the copper wire and the olivine beads. I just think they're really lovely and elegant, and they'll make a statement without being too heavy, which is always great for a pair of earrings. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and you'll find a list of all the materials I've used just below the video. And if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments. Thanks, bye.